Hello, and welcome to my channel, The Book of Whispers. Tonight, I thought I would read a few excerpts from the writings of an ancient philosopher, thinker, and statesman from ancient Rome, known as Pliny the Elder. Before I get into the reading for tonight, I thought I would give a very brief introduction to who he was. He was born in 23 AD, and when 22 years old, he traveled to Africa, Egypt, and Greece. Around 29 years old, he began to write a treatise on Roman history, but wisely suspended its publication during the reign of Nero. It wasn't until after the emperor's death that Pliny was able to publish his writings. He is primarily known for his work, Natural History, which was published in 77 AD, 2 years before his passing at Pompeii in 79 AD, where he attempted to rescue any possible survivors of Mount Vesuvius's eruption. His enormous body of work covers a wide variety of topics, including animals, plants, and minerals, and he exhibits a keen interest in astronomy with observations of the planets and stars, demonstrating a keen observational mind of the world around him. Now, let us begin. Chapter 1. Whether the world be finite, and whether there be more than one world. The world, and whatever that be, which we otherwise call the heavens, by the vault of which all things are enclosed, we must conceive to be a deity, to be eternal, without bounds, neither created nor subject at any time to destruction. To inquire what is beyond, it is no concern of man, nor can the human mind form any conjecture respecting it. It is sacred, eternal, and without bounds, all in all, indeed, including everything in itself, finite, yet like what is infinite, the most certain of all things, yet like what is uncertain, externally and internally, embracing all things in itself, is the work of nature, and itself constitutes nature. It is madness to harass the mind, as some have done, with attempts to measure the world, and to publish these attempts, or, like others, to argue from what they have made out, that there are innumerable other worlds, and that we must believe there to be so many other natures, or that, if only one nature produced the whole, there will be so many suns and so many moons, and that each of them will have immense trains of other heavenly bodies, as if the same question would not reoccur at every step of our inquiry, anxious as we must be to arrive at some termination, or as if this infinity which we ascribe to nature the former of all things, cannot be more easily comprehended by one single formation, especially when that is so extensive. It is madness, perfect madness, to go out of this world and to search for what is beyond it, as if one who is ignorant of his own dimensions could ascertain the measure of anything else, or as if the human mind could see what the world itself cannot contain. Chapter 2. Of the form of the world. That it has the form of a perfect globe, we learn from the name which has been uniformly given to it, as well as from numerous natural arguments. For not only does a figure of this kind return everywhere into itself, and sustain itself, also including itself, requiring no adjustments, not sensible of either end or beginning in any of its parts, and is best fitted for that motion, with which, as will appear hereafter, it is continually turning round, but still more, because we perceive it by the evidence of the sight to be, in every part, convex and central, which could not be the case were it of any other figure. Chapter 3. Of its nature, whence the name is derived. The rising and the setting of the sun clearly prove that this globe is carried round in the space of 24 hours, in an eternal and never-ceasing circuit, and with incredible swiftness. I am not able to say whether the sound caused by the whirling about of so great a mass be excessive, and therefore far beyond what our ears can perceive, nor indeed whether the resounding of so many stars, all carried along at the same time and revolving in their orbits, may not produce a kind of delightful harmony of incredible sweetness. To us, who are in the interior, the world appears to glide silently along, both by day and by night. Various circumstances in nature prove to us that there are impressed on the heavens innumerable figures of animals and of all kinds of objects, and that its surface is not perfectly polished, like the eggs of birds, as some celebrated authors assert. For we find that the seeds of all bodies fall down from it, principally into the ocean, and being mixed together, that a variety of monstrous forms are in this way frequently produced. And indeed, this is evident to the eye, for in one part we have the figure of a wagon, in another of a bear, of a bull, and of a letter, while in the middle of them, over our heads, there is a white circle. With respect to the name, I am influenced by the unanimous opinions of all nations. For what the Greeks, from its being ornamented, have termed cosmos, we, from its perfect and complete elegance, have termed mundus. For modern listeners, this is the Latin word for world, which was used as a translation of the Greek word cosmos. The name coelum, also meaning sky or heaven in Latin, no doubt, Pliny continues, refers to its being engraven, as it were, with the stars, as Varro suggests, in confirmation of this idea, we may adduce the zodiac, in which are 12 figures of animals. Through them, it is that the sun has continued its course for so many ages. Chapter 4 of the Elements and the Planets. I do not find that anyone has doubted that there are 4 elements. The highest of these is supposed to be fire, and hence proceed the eyes of so many glittering stars. The next is that spirit which both the Greeks and ourselves call by the same name, air. It is by the force of this vital principle, pervading all things and mingling with all, that the earth, together with the 4th element, water, is balanced in the middle of space. These are mutually bound together, the lighter being restrained by the heavier, so that they cannot fly off, while on the contrary, from the lighter tending upwards, the heavier are so suspended that they cannot fall down. Thus, by an equal tendency, in an opposite direction, each of them remains in its appropriate place, bound together by the never-ceasing revolution of the world, which always turning on itself, the earth falls to the lowest part and is in the middle of the whole, while it remains suspended in the center, and, as it were, balancing this center in which it is suspended, so that it alone remains immovable, which all things revolve round it, being connected with every other part, whilst they all rest upon it. Between this body and the heavens there are suspended in this aerial spirit 7 stars, separated by determinate spaces, which, on account of their motion, we call wandering, although in reality none are less so. The sun is carried along in the midst of these, a body of great size and power, the ruler not only of the seasons and of the different climates, but also of the stars themselves and of the heavens. When we consider his operations, we must regard him as the life, or rather, the mind of the universe, the chief regulator and the god of nature. He also lends his light to the other stars. He is most illustrious and excellent, beholding all things and hearing all things, which I perceive is ascribed to him exclusively by the prince of poets, Homer. Chapter 5 of God. I consider it, therefore, an indication of human weakness to inquire into the figure and form of God, for whatever God be, if there be any other God, and wherever he exists, he is all sense, all sight, all hearing, all life, all mind, and all within himself. To believe that there are a number of gods, derived from the virtues and vices of man, as chastity, concord, understanding, hope, honor, clemency, and fidelity, or, according to the opinion of Democritus, that there are only 2, punishment and reward, indicates still greater folly. Human nature, weak and frail as it is, mindful of its own infirmity, has made these divisions so that every one might have recourse to that which he supposed himself to stand more particularly in need of. Hence we find different names employed by different nations. The inferior deities are arranged in classes, and diseases and plagues are deified, in consequence of our anxious wish to propitiate them. It was from this cause that a temple was dedicated to Fever, at the public expense, on the Palatine Hill, and to Arbona near the temple of the Lares, and that an altar was elected to good fortune on the Esquiline. Hence we may understand how it comes to pass that there is a greater population of the celestials than of human beings, since each individual makes a separate god for himself, adopting his own Juno and his own genius. And there are nations who make gods of certain animals, and even certain obscene things, which are not to be spoken of, swearing by stinking meats and such like, to suppose that marriages are contracted between the gods, and that during so long a period there should have been no issue from them, that some of them should be old and always gray-headed, and others young like children, some winged, lame, produced from eggs, living and dying on alternate days, is sufficiently puerile and foolish. But it is the height of impudence to imagine that adultery takes place between them, that they have contests and quarrels, and that there are gods of theft, of various crimes. To assist man is to be a god. This is the path to eternal glory. This is the path which the Roman nobles formerly pursued, and this is the path which is now pursued by the greatest ruler of our age, Vespasian Augustus, he who has come to the relief of an exhausted empire, as well as by his sons. This was the ancient mode of remunerating those who deserved it, to regard them as gods, for the names of all the gods, as well as of the stars, that I have mentioned above, have been derived from their services to mankind. And with respect to Jupiter and Mercury, and the rest of the celestial nomenclature, who does not admit that they have reference to certain natural phenomena? But it is ridiculous to suppose that the great head of all things, whatever it be, pays any regard to human affairs. Can we believe, or rather can there be any doubt, that it is not polluted by such a disagreeable and complicated office? It is not easy to determine which opinion would be most for the advantage of mankind, since we observe some who have no respect for the gods, and others who carry it to a scandalous excess. They are slaves to foreign ceremonies. They carry on their fingers the gods and the monsters whom they worship. They condemn, and they lay great stress on certain kinds of food. They impose on themselves dreadful ordinances, not even sleeping quietly. They do not marry or adopt children, or indeed do anything else, without the sanction of their sacred rites. There are others, on the contrary, who will cheat in the very capital, and will forswear themselves even by Jupiter Tonans, and while these thrive in their crimes, the others torment themselves with their superstitions to no purpose. Among these discordant opinions, mankind have discovered for themselves a kind of intermediate deity, by which our skepticism concerning God is still increased. For all over the world, in all places, and at all times. Fortune is the only God whom everyone invokes. She alone is spoken of. She alone is accused and is supposed to be guilty. She alone is in our thoughts, is praised and blamed, and is loaded with reproaches, wavering as she is, conceived by the generality of mankind, to be blind, wandering, inconstant, uncertain, unvariable, and often favoring the unworthy. To her are referred all our losses and all our gains, and in casting up the accounts of mortals, she alone balances the 2 pages of our sheet. We are so much in the power of chance, that chance itself is considered as a god, and the existence of God becomes doubtful. But there are others who reject this principle and assign events to the influence of the stars and to the laws of our nativity. They suppose that God, once for all, issues his decrees and never afterwards interferes. This opinion begins to gain ground, and both the learned and the unlearned vulgar are falling into it. Hence we have the admonitions of thunder, the warnings of oracles, the predictions of soothsayers, and things too trifling to be mentioned, as sneezing and stumbling with the feet reckoned among omens. The late Emperor Augustus relates that he put the left shoe on the wrong foot, the day when he was near being assaulted by his soldiers, and such things as these so embarrass improvident mortals, that among all of them this alone is certain, that there is nothing certain, and that there is nothing more proud or more wretched than man. For other animals have no care. For other animals have no care but to provide for their subsistence, for which the spontaneous kindness of nature is all sufficient, and this one circumstance renders their lot more especially preferable, that they never think about glory or money or ambition, and above all, they never reflect on death. The belief, however, that on these points the gods superintend human affairs is useful to us, as well as that the punishment of crimes, although sometimes tardy, from the deity being occupied with such a mass of business, is never entirely remitted, and that the human race was not made the next in rank to himself, in order that they might be degraded like brutes. And indeed, this constitutes the great comfort in this imperfect state of man, that even the deity cannot do everything, for he cannot procure death for himself, even if he wished it, which, so numerous are the evils of life, has been granted to man as our chief good, nor can he make mortals immortal, or recall to life those who are dead, nor can he effect that he who has once lived shall not have lived, or that he who has enjoyed honors shall not have enjoyed them, nor has he any influence over past events, but to cause them to be forgotten. And if we illustrate the nature of our connection with God by a less serious argument, he cannot make twice 10, not to be 20, and many other things of this kind. By these considerations, the power of nature is clearly proved, and is shown to be what we call God. It is not foreign to the subject to have digressed into these matters, familiar as they are to everyone from the continual discussions that take place respecting God. Chapter 6. Of the nature of the stars, of the motion of the planets. Let us return from this digression to the other parts of nature. The stars, which are described as fixed in the heavens, are not, as the vulgar suppose, attached each of them to different individuals. The brighter to the rich, those that are less so to the poor, and the dim to the aged, shining according to the lot of the individual, and separately assigned to mortals, for they have neither come into existence, nor do they perish in connection with particular persons, nor does a falling star indicate that any one is dead. We are not so closely connected with the heavens as that the shining of the stars is affected by our death. When they are supposed to shoot or fall, they throw out, by the force of their fire, as if from an excess of nutriment, the superabundance of the humour which they have absorbed, as we observe to take place from the oil in our lamps when they are burning. The nature of the celestial bodies is eternal, being interwoven, as it were, with the world, and by this union rendering it solid. But they exert their most powerful influence on the earth. This, notwithstanding its subtlety, may be known by the clearness and the magnitude of the effect. As we shall point out in the proper place, the account of the circles of the heavens will be better understood when we come to speak of the earth, since they have all a reference to it, except what has been discovered respecting the zodiac, which I shall now detail. Anaximander the Milesian, in the 58th Olympiad, is said to have been the first who understood its obliquity, and thus opened the road to a correct knowledge of the subject. Afterwards, Cleostratus made the signs in it, first marking those of Aries and Sagittarius. Atlas had formed the sphere long before this time, but now, leaving the further consideration of the subject, we must treat of the bodies that are situated between the earth and the heavens. It is certain that the star called Saturn is the highest and therefore appears the smallest, that he passes through the largest circuit, and that he is at least 30 years in completing it. The course of all the planets, and among others of the sun and the moon, is in the contrary direction to that of the heavens, that is towards the left, while the heavens are rapidly carrying about to the right. And although by the stars constantly revolving with immense velocity, they are raised up and hurried on to the part where they set, yet they are all forced by a motion of their own in an opposite direction, and this is so ordered lest the air, being always moved in the same direction by the constant whirling of the heavens, should accumulate into one mass, whereas now it is divided and separated and beaten into small pieces by the opposite motion of the different stars. Saturn is a star of a cold and rigid nature, while the orbit of Jupiter is much lower, and is carried round in 12 years. The next star, Mars, which some persons call Hercules, is of a fiery and burning nature, and from its nearness to the sun is carried round in little less than 2 years, in consequence of the excessive heat of this star and the rigidity of Saturn, Jupiter, which is interposed between the two, is tempered by both of them, and is thus rendered salutary. The path of the sun consists of 360 degrees, but in order that the shadow may return to the same point of the dial, we are obliged to add in each year 5 days and the fourth part of a day. On this account, an intercalary day is given to every 5th year, that the period of the seasons may agree with that of the sun. Below the sun revolves the great star called Venus, wandering with an alternate motion, and even in its surnames rivaling the sun and the moon. For when it precedes the day and rises in the morning, it receives the name of Lucifer, as if it were another sun, hastening on the day. On the contrary, when it shines in the west, it is named Vesper, as prolonging the light, and performing the office of the moon. Pythagoras the Samian was the first who discovered its nature about the 62nd Olympiad in the 222nd year of the city. It excels all the other stars in size, and its brilliancy is so considerable that it is the only star which produces a shadow by its rays. There has, consequently, been great interest made for its name. Some have called it the Star of Juno, others of Isis, and others of the Mother of the Gods. By its influence, everything in the earth is generated, for as it rises in either direction, it sprinkles everything with its genial dew, and not only matures the productions of the earth, but it stimulates all living things. It completes the circuit of the zodiac in 348 days, never receding from the sun more than 46 degrees, according to Timaeus. Similarly circumstanced, but by no means equal in size and in power, next to it is the star Mercury, by some called Apollo. It is carried in a lower orbit and moves in a course which is quicker by 9 days, shining sometimes before the rising of the sun, and at other times after its setting, but never going farther from it than 23 degrees, as we learn from Timaeus and Sosiones. The nature of these two stars is peculiar, and is not the same with those mentioned above, for those are seen to recede from the sun through 1/3 or 1/4 part of the heavens, and are often seen opposite to it. They have also other larger circuits, in which they make their complete revolutions, as will be described in the account of the great year. But the moon, which is the last of the stars, and the one the most connected with the earth, the remedy provided by nature for darkness, excels all the others in its admirable qualities, by the variety of appearances which it assumes. It puzzles the observers, mortified that they should be the most ignorant concerning that star which is the nearest to them. She is always waxing or waning. Sometimes her disk is curved into horns, sometimes it is divided into 2 equal portions, and at other times it is swelled out into a full orb. Sometimes she appears spotted, and suddenly becomes very bright. She appears very large with her full orb, and suddenly becomes invisible, now continuing during all the night, now rising late, and now aiding the light of the sun during part of the day, becoming eclipsed, and yet being visible while she is eclipsed, concealing herself at the end of the month, and yet not supposed to be eclipsed. Sometimes she is low down, sometimes she is high up, and that not according to one uniform course, being at one time raised up to the heavens, at other times almost contiguous to the mountains, now elevated in the north, now depressed in the south, all which circumstances having been noticed by Endymion, a report was spread about that he was in love with the moon. We are not indeed sufficiently grateful to those who with their so much labor and care have enlightened us with this light, while so diseased is the human mind that we take pleasure in the writing the annals of human conflict and barbarity, in order that the crimes of men may be made known to those who are ignorant of the constitution of the world itself. Being nearest to the axis, and therefore having the smallest orbit, the moon passes in 27 days, and the 1/3 part of a day, through the same space for which Saturn, the highest of the planets, as was stated above, requires 30 years. After remaining for 2 days in conjunction with the sun, on the 30th day she again very slowly emerges to pursue her accustomed course. I know not whether she ought not to be considered as our instructress in everything that can be known respecting the heavens, as that the year is divided into the 12 divisions of the months, since she follows the sun for the same number of times, until he returns to the commencement of his course, and that her brightness, as well as that of the other stars, is regulated by that of the sun, if indeed they all of them shine by light borrowed from him, such as we see floating about, when it is reflected from the surface of water. On this account it is that she dissolves so much moisture by a gentle and less perfect force, and adds to the quantity of that which the rays of the sun consume. On this account she appears with an unequal light, because being full only when she is in opposition, on all the remaining days she shows only so much of herself to the earth as she receives light from the sun. She is not seen in conjunction, because at that time she sends back the whole stream of light to the source whence she has derived it. That the stars generally are nourished by the terrestrial moisture is evident, because when the moon is only half visible, she is sometimes seen spotted, her power of absorbing moisture not having been powerful enough, for the spots are nothing else than the dregs of the earth drawn up along with the moisture. But her eclipses and those of the sun, the most wonderful of all the phenomena of nature, and which are like prodigies, serve to indicate the magnitude of these bodies and the shadow which they cast.